Have you ever trusted someone with your most vulnerable moment, only to discover they betrayed you in the worst possible way? I want to know where you're watching from today, and whether you've ever felt that sickening realization that someone you trusted with your body, your privacy, your dignity, turned out to be someone else entirely. Drop your state or country in the comments, because this story is about that kind of betrayal, the kind that shatters everything you thought you knew about safety. Right now, in this moment, Cassidy Monroe is staring at her own face on a stranger's tablet. Not a social media photo, not a professional headshot. Her face, yes, but attached to images she never consented to share with anyone except her doctor. Medical photos, intimate ones. The kind taken in sterile examination rooms under fluorescent lights while you try not to think about how exposed you are, how vulnerable, how much you have to trust that the person holding the camera is a professional who will guard your privacy like it's sacred. The man across the table from her doesn't look up. He doesn't know she's seen. He's too busy reading whatever message accompanied those photos, his expression unreadable in that way powerful men have perfected. She has maybe 5 seconds before he notices her noticing. 5 seconds to decide whether to run, to scream, to pretend she didn't see. Her hands are shaking. She grips her coffee cup tighter, feeling the ceramic heat burn against her palms, using the pain to ground herself in reality. This cannot be happening. This cannot be real. But let's back up. Let's go back 3 weeks, before this impossible moment, before everything Cassidy thought she knew about her life turned out to be built on lies. 3 weeks ago, Cassidy Monroe was a physical therapist who loved her job and trusted her doctors. At 28, she'd worked hard to build her career, spending her days helping people recover from injuries, regain mobility, reclaim their lives after accidents or surgeries left them broken. She was good at what she did. Patient. Thorough. She understood vulnerability because she'd seen it up close every day for 6 years. She'd also understood it personally when a health scare sent her to Dr. Warren's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in March. The lump had been nothing. Benign. Completely harmless. But getting to that diagnosis had required tests, imaging, examinations that left Cassidy feeling more exposed than she'd ever felt in her life. Dr. Warren had been professional, kind even, explaining every step of the process with a calm demeanor that made her feel safe despite her fear. "This is standard procedure," he'd said when he picked up the camera. "Medical records require documentation. Everything is completely confidential, protected by privacy laws. You have nothing to worry about, Miss Monroe." She believed him. Why wouldn't she? He was her doctor. The office was clean and professional, his credentials framed on the wall, his manner gentle as he talked her through each uncomfortable moment. She'd changed into the paper gown, positioned herself as instructed, and tried not to think about the camera's click, click, click as he documented angles and measurements for her file. Completely confidential. Protected by law. Nothing to worry about. Lies. All of it lies. Cassidy had left that appointment with relief flooding her system, grateful for good news, grateful it was over, grateful to return to normal life. She'd thrown herself back into work, picked up extra shifts at the clinic, spent her evenings training for a half marathon she'd signed up for on impulse. Life had returned to its comfortable rhythm. The health scare became just another story, another bullet dodged, another reason to appreciate her body and what it could do. Until today. Today she'd taken a meeting with a medical equipment supplier at an upscale restaurant in downtown Portland. The man, introduced to her simply as Mr. Castellano, wanted to discuss outfitting a new rehabilitation facility with state-of-the-art therapy equipment. Big contract. Exactly the kind of professional opportunity Cassidy had been working toward. She'd prepared thoroughly, brought her portfolio, dressed in her best professional attire, arrived 15 minutes early. The restaurant was the kind of place that made her feel slightly out of her element. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs, the menu listing prices that made her wince internally, the clientele wearing suits that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But she'd smiled, ordered coffee instead of the wine Mr. Castellano offered, and launched into her presentation with the confidence of someone who knew her field inside and out. He'd been attentive, asking good questions, taking notes. Everything about the meeting had felt legitimate, professional, exactly what it was supposed to be. His security detail, 2 men positioned discreetly near the entrance, had seemed unusual but not alarming. Wealthy people had security. It wasn't her business. Then his phone had buzzed. He'd glanced at it, frowned, pulled out his tablet to read something more carefully. And Cassidy, trying to be polite, trying not to stare while he handled business, had let her gaze drift across the screen. Her own face stared back at her. Not the professional headshot from her clinic's website. Not a casual photo from social media. Her face, pale under fluorescent lighting, eyes closed, paper gown pulled aside. One of Dr. Warren's medical photos. The ones that were supposed to be confidential. Protected. Secure. The coffee cup trembled in her grip. Her mind raced, trying to find an explanation that made sense, that didn't mean what she thought it meant. Maybe it was a different person who looked like her. Maybe she was mistaken. Maybe the angle was wrong, and she was seeing things that weren't there because exhaustion had caught up with her after too many double shifts. But she knew her own face. She knew the small scar on her collarbone from a childhood bicycle accident. She knew the mole just below her left ear. She knew. Mr. Castellano looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her face. Whatever he saw there, horror or recognition or dawning understanding, made his eyes narrow slightly. He set down the tablet, screen side down against the table. "Miss Monroe," he said, his voice still professionally neutral, but with an edge now, something harder underneath. "Is something wrong?" Everything. Everything was wrong. Her photos were on his tablet. Her private, confidential, supposedly protected medical photos were in the hands of a stranger in an expensive suit with security guards, in a meeting that suddenly felt less like business and more like something else entirely. "Where did you get those?" The words came out steadier than she felt. Some core of strength she didn't know she had keeping her voice level. "The photos on your tablet. Where did you get them?" His expression didn't change. "I think there's been a misunderstanding, Miss Monroe. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting for another time. Tell me where you got those photos." Her voice rose slightly, several nearby tables glancing over with mild interest. "I saw them. I know what I saw." Mr. Castellano's jaw tightened. His hand moved, just slightly, and Cassidy realized one of the security guards had shifted position, moving closer without seeming to move at all. The situation was escalating into something dangerous, and she didn't understand how or why. "Miss Monroe, I need you to stay calm." His voice dropped lower, more urgent. "You're drawing attention, and that's not safe right now." "Safe?" She let out a laugh that sounded slightly unhinged even to her own ears. "You have my medical photos, and you're talking to me about safe? Who are you? What do you want?" Before he could answer, before she could push back from the table and run like every instinct was screaming at her to do, the restaurant's front window exploded inward. Glass rained down in a glittering cascade as gunfire erupted from the street. Screams filled the air, people diving for cover, chairs clattering as patrons scrambled for safety. Cassidy froze, her mind unable to process the sudden shift from uncomfortable confrontation to active danger. Mr. Castellano didn't freeze. He moved with the kind of speed that spoke of training, of experience, of a man who'd been in situations like this before. His hand closed around her wrist, yanking her down below the table line as bullets punched through the restaurant's interior. "Get down," he barked, his body positioning itself between her and the shattered window. His security guards had weapons drawn, returning fire toward the street with a precision that seemed impossible. The other guard was on his phone, speaking rapid Italian, coordinating something. Everything was chaos and noise and breaking glass, and Cassidy's mind couldn't catch up. Couldn't understand how a professional lunch meeting had turned into a war zone. "We need to move," Mr. Castellano said, his hand still gripping her wrist. His eyes scanned the restaurant, calculating, planning. "When I say go, you stay low and you run for the kitchen. Don't stop. Don't look back." "I don't understand." Her voice came out small, childlike, nothing like the confident professional she'd been 10 minutes ago. "What's happening?" "Someone wants you dead, Miss Monroe." His voice was matter of fact, almost gentle despite the circumstances. "And if we don't move right now, they're going to succeed." The gunfire paused, just for a moment. A breath. A heartbeat. Mr. Castellano pulled her to her feet, keeping himself between her and the window, and shoved her toward the kitchen entrance. "Go. Now." Cassidy ran. She didn't think, didn't question, just followed orders because some primal part of her brain recognized authority in crisis. Her shoe slipped on broken glass and spilled wine, her professional skirt restricting her stride, her breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind her, she heard more gunfire, more shouting, the sound of sirens finally rising in the distance. The kitchen was empty, staff already evacuated through emergency protocols. Mr. Castellano steered her toward the back exit, his security guard falling in behind them, weapons still drawn. A black SUV with tinted windows waited in the alley, engine running, door already open. "Get in," Mr. Castellano ordered, and Cassidy's brief hesitation earned her a look that brooked no argument. "Now, Miss Monroe, those shooters will regroup and come around back. You want to be here when they do?" She didn't. She climbed into the SUV on shaking legs, Mr. Castellano sliding in beside her, the door slamming shut before the vehicle was already moving. The security guard drove with the same precision he'd shown with a weapon, navigating through alleys and side streets with obvious familiarity. Cassidy pressed herself against the far door, trying to put distance between herself and the man who had her photos, the man who'd just saved her life, the man who was either her rescuer or her kidnapper, and she couldn't tell which. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice hoarse. "What's happening? Why do you have my photos?" Mr. Castellano, if that was even his real name, looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. "My name is Dominic Salvatore," he said. "And you, Miss Monroe, are in more danger than you realize." The SUV climbed into the hills overlooking Portland, each turn taking Cassidy further from everything familiar. She watched the city shrink below them through the tinted windows, her hands clenched so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. Dominic Salvatore sat beside her in silence, his presence taking up more space than his physical body should occupy, his attention on his phone as he typed rapid messages to someone. The security guard driving hadn't spoken once. Professional. Controlled. Exactly the kind of person who knew how to handle weapons and high-speed escapes through city streets without breaking a sweat. Which meant this wasn't his first time. Which meant Dominic Salvatore was exactly the kind of man who needed armed guards and bulletproof vehicles. Cassidy's mind kept circling back to those photos. Her face. Her body. Her private medical images in this stranger's hands. A stranger who just pulled her out of a gunfight. A stranger who claimed she was in danger. A stranger whose name sounded Italian, and whose guards spoke Italian, and whose entire presence screamed organized crime in ways her sheltered physical therapist life had never prepared her for. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Dominic glanced up from his phone. "Somewhere safe. My home." "Your home." She let out a breath that might have been a laugh if terror hadn't stripped all humor from it. "I don't know you. I don't know why people were shooting at us. I don't know why you have my private medical photos on your tablet. And you want me to go to your home?" He studied her for a long moment, his green eyes assessing in a way that made her feel simultaneously visible and protected. It was an unsettling combination. "Miss Monroe," he said finally, "I understand you're frightened. You have every right to be. But right now, my home is the safest place for you in this entire city. Possibly this entire state. How do I know you're not the danger?" The words came out sharper than she intended, fear manifesting as anger because anger was easier than the helpless terror currently threatening to overwhelm her. "For all I know, you're the one who wants me dead. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead." His voice was matter of fact, not threatening, just stating what he clearly believed to be obvious truth. "I've had people watching you for 3 days, Miss Monroe. I could have moved on you at any time. Instead, I've been trying to figure out how to approach this situation without terrifying you. Obviously, that plan failed. You've been watching me?" Her voice rose. "For 3 days? To keep you alive." He pocketed his phone, giving her his full attention now. "Those shooters at the restaurant weren't random. They were sent specifically to kill you before you could testify." "Testify?" Cassidy shook her head, feeling like she'd walked into the wrong movie, the wrong life, the wrong reality entirely. "Testify about what?" "I haven't witnessed anything. I'm a physical therapist. I help people recover from knee surgeries and car accidents. I don't know anything worth killing over." "Dr. Warren," Dominic said, and something in his tone made her go still. "Your doctor. You know him as a medical professional. The FBI knows him as part of an illegal operation selling patient information and intimate medical photos to blackmailers and worse." The words hit her like physical blows. "No, no, That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's documented. Dominic's voice gentled slightly, recognition of her distress flickering across his features. My family has been cooperating with a federal investigation into this operation for 8 months. Your photos were found 3 days ago in a raid on one of the distribution networks, along with photos of 47 other women. Cassidy pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting nausea. 47. 47 women who'd trusted their doctors, who'd been vulnerable and exposed and assured of confidentiality. 47 violations. The FBI wants you to testify, Dominic continued. You're one of the few victims who can definitively identify Dr. Warren, who can provide testimony about how he obtained the photos under false medical pretenses. Your testimony could help lock him away and dismantle the entire operation. I can't. The words came out panicked, automatic. I can't stand up in court and have people see those photos, have strangers know what was done to me. I can't. The photos won't be shown publicly. They're evidence, sealed by the court. But your testimony about the circumstances under which they were taken, that's critical. Dominic leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. Miss Monroe, Cassidy, I know this is overwhelming. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But the people running this operation, they know you were identified as a potential witness. They know you saw something at that meeting today, something that confirms I have access to their network. And they will not hesitate to eliminate you to protect themselves. The SUV turned through a gate that opened automatically, climbing a private drive toward a modern glass and steel structure that probably cost more than Cassidy would earn in 10 lifetimes. The house, if you could call something that size a house, perched on the hillside with panoramic views of the city below. Beautiful. Isolated. The kind of place where no one would hear you scream. Dominic must have seen something in her face because his expression shifted. You're safe here, he said quietly. I give you my word. Whatever you think of me, whatever you've heard about my family, I don't hurt women. I don't tolerate anyone who does. And right now, keeping you alive is my top priority. Why? Cassidy met his eyes, searching for deception and finding only steady certainty. Why do you care? You are what, Mafia? Crime family. Why would you help the FBI? Because 8 years ago, someone did to my mother what was done to you. His jaw tightened, old anger surfacing. Compromising photos used to blackmail our family. She suffered. We all did. When the FBI approached us about this investigation, when I learned what these people were doing to women, I agreed to cooperate. Not for immunity or deals. Because this ends now. The vulnerability in those words, the raw honesty, did more to calm Cassidy's fear than any amount of reassurance could have. She saw him clearly for the first time, not as a threat, but as a person who understood violation on a fundamental level. The SUV stopped in front of the house. The security guard opened Dominic's door, then moved to open Cassidy's with careful courtesy. She climbed out on shaking legs, looking up at the massive structure of glass and steel and modern architecture that somehow managed to feel more like a fortress than a home. Come inside, Dominic said, his hand hovering near her elbow without quite touching. I'll show you to a guest room. You can clean up, rest, process. We'll talk more when you're ready. The interior was as stunning as the exterior, all open space and expensive furniture and art that probably belonged in museums. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered those impossible views, the city spread out below like a kingdom. Cassidy followed Dominic through the main living area, her therapist's mind automatically noting the quality of the hardwood floors, the ergonomic design of the furniture, the way everything was positioned for both aesthetic and functional purpose. This is your room, Dominic said, opening a door to reveal a space larger than Cassidy's entire apartment. Private bathroom through there. Closet has clothes in various sizes. My sister keeps a wardrobe here. Help yourself to anything. There's a lock on the inside of the door if that makes you more comfortable. Cassidy stepped inside, overwhelmed by the casual luxury of it all. The bed looked like something from a hotel magazine spread. The bathroom, glimpsed through the open door, featured a soaking tub and rainfall shower that made her studio's cramped bathroom seem even more pathetic by comparison. Why are you doing this? She asked, turning to face him. Really, not the investigation stuff. Why are you personally going this far to protect someone you don't know? Dominic was quiet for a moment, standing in the doorway, his considerable height and presence somehow less threatening in this domestic context. Because no one protected my mother, he said finally. Because I was 19 and away at college, and I couldn't stop what happened to her. Because every woman who suffers this kind of violation deserves someone willing to stand between her and the people who want to hurt her. And right now, that someone is me. The honesty in his voice, the pain barely concealed beneath professional control, cracked something in Cassidy's chest. She'd spent the last hour terrified of him, convinced he was danger personified. But standing here in this beautiful guest room, looking at a man who'd positioned himself as her shield against threats she didn't understand, she saw something else entirely. Saw someone who'd been wounded and turned that wound into protection for others. Thank you, she said softly, for getting me out of that restaurant, for bringing me here. For, whatever this is, whatever happens next, thank you for not being one of the bad guys. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, warmth breaking through the professional mask. Get some rest, he said. There's food in the kitchen when you're hungry. I'll be in my office handling some things. But Marco, the guard who drove, he'll be nearby if you need anything. He started to leave, then paused. Cassidy, those photos that were taken of you, the ones in that raid, they're in federal custody now. The only reason I had copies on my tablet was to identify potential victims, to figure out who needed protection. I want you to know that I don't look at you and see those images. I see a woman who survived something terrible and deserves justice. That's all. He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him with careful quietness. Cassidy stood in the center of the luxury guest room, her professional clothes rumpled and glass-dusted from the restaurant, her mind spinning with too much information to process. Dr. Warren had betrayed her, had betrayed dozens of women. Her private photos had been sold, distributed, used by people she'd never met for purposes she didn't want to imagine. People wanted her dead to keep her from testifying. And the only person standing between her and those people was a mafia boss who knew what violation felt like because he'd watched his mother suffer it. She should be terrified, should be planning escape routes, should be calling the police or her sister or someone from her old safe normal life. Instead, Cassidy sank onto the edge of that magnificent bed and let herself feel, for the first time since seeing those photos on Dominic's tablet, like maybe she wasn't completely alone in this nightmare. Dominic returned to his office, closing the door and allowing himself exactly 60 seconds to let the facade drop. His hands shook slightly as he poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, the amber liquid sloshing in the crystal glass. He downed it in one swallow, feeling the burn, using it to center himself. She'd looked at him with such fear, such distrust. And she'd been right too, because men like him weren't safe, weren't heroes, weren't anything close to what a woman like Cassidy Monroe deserved in her life. But she'd also looked at him with something else toward the end. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Like she'd seen past the armor to the wounded 19-year-old boy who'd failed to protect his mother. His phone buzzed. Marco's name on the screen. She's in her room, the text read. Hasn't tried to leave. Want me to post outside her door? Dominic typed back quickly. No. Give her space. Monitor the perimeter. Anyone comes within a mile of this property, I want to know. He set down the phone and pulled up the federal case files on his computer. 47 women. 47 violations. Dr. Warren was one of 3 doctors involved, but he was the linchpin, the one whose testimony about the operation structure could bring down the whole network. And Cassidy was the witness who could put Warren away, which made her the most dangerous person to the operation, and therefore the most valuable person to protect. Dominic had meant what he told her. He'd been watching her for 3 days, ever since her name appeared on the victim list. Had her followed, monitored, kept safe from a distance while trying to figure out how to approach someone whose trust had already been shattered by the medical profession. He'd also meant what he hadn't told her. That from the first moment he'd seen her photo, not the medical ones but the professional headshot the FBI had pulled from her clinic's website, he'd felt something shift. She had kind eyes. Warm. The kind of person who probably made her patients feel safe, who smiled genuinely and cared about their recovery. The kind of person his world would destroy. But his world was also the only thing keeping her alive right now. So he'd have to find a way to be what she needed without letting himself want things he had no business wanting. His phone rang. Gabriella's name flashing on screen. Tell me she's safe, his sister said without preamble when he answered. She's here. In the guest room. Dominic leaned back in his chair. The restaurant shooting was coordinated. 3 shooters, professional. They knew she'd be there, which means someone in the investigation leaked. Gabriella's voice went hard. We have a problem, Dominic. We have several problems. He pulled up the security feeds, checking each camera, each angle of the property. But right now, keeping Cassidy Monroe alive is problem number 1. Everything else comes after. You like her. It wasn't a question. Gabriella knew him too well. I haven't even had a real conversation with her yet. But even as he said it, Dominic knew it was a deflection. He'd watched her for 3 days. Watched her smile at her patients. Watched her stop to help an elderly man load groceries into his car. Watched her choose the salad over the pasta at lunch because she was training for some race. He'd learned her routines, her kindness, the way she moved through the world with gentle competence. You like her, Gabriella repeated. Be careful, big brother. This is already complicated enough. She hung up before he could argue, leaving Dominic alone with his scotch and his surveillance feeds and the knowledge that his sister was absolutely right. He did like Cassidy Monroe, which was inconvenient, inappropriate, and potentially dangerous for both of them. But as he watched the guest room camera, saw her finally move to the bathroom, heard the water start running, he made himself a promise. He would keep her safe. He would help her get justice. He would be whatever she needed him to be to survive this. And when it was over, when the threats were eliminated and she could return to her normal life, he would let her go. Because that's what good men did. Even men like him who were only good in comparison to the truly evil. Cassidy woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and a moment of complete disorientation. The bed beneath her was too soft, too large. The room too spacious, too elegant. The city view too expansive to be real. Then memory crashed back. The restaurant. The gunfire. Dominic Salvatore. Her medical photos in the hands of criminals who wanted her dead. She'd slept in her clothes, too exhausted and overwhelmed to even consider the offered wardrobe in the closet. Now she felt rumpled and out of place in this palace of glass and steel. The clock on the nightstand read 8:30. She'd slept for nearly 12 hours, her body shutting down under the weight of trauma and fear. The smell of coffee drifted under her door, followed by something else. Bacon, maybe. Her stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since that interrupted lunch meeting, and despite everything, the prospect of food pulled her from bed. Cassidy found clothes in the closet that almost fit, designer jeans and a soft cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe back home. She showered quickly in that magnificent bathroom, trying not to think about how good the water pressure felt, how the expensive toiletries smelled like something from a spa. This wasn't her life. This was temporary. She needed to remember that. The kitchen was larger than most restaurants, all commercial-grade appliances and marble countertops. Dominic stood at the stove, dressed casually in dark jeans and a t-shirt that showed off shoulders she'd noticed yesterday despite the terror. He looked different without the suit. Younger, more approachable, still dangerous, but in a way that seemed less threatening in domestic context. "Good morning," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "I wasn't sure what you'd want, so I made options. There's coffee in the pot." Cassidy poured herself a cup, grateful for something to do with her hands. "You cook." "When I'm home." Something about his tone suggested home wasn't a place he spent much time. He plated eggs and bacon, added toast, set it on the island between them. "My mother insisted all her children learn to cook. Said it was a basic survival skill." "Smart woman." Cassidy slid onto a bar stool, the domestic normalcy of breakfast feeling surreal after yesterday's violence. Does she live nearby?" "Arizona. Retired there 5 years ago after my father passed. She visits, but the weather suits her better than Portland rain." Dominic poured his own coffee, leaned against the counter across from her. "She'd like you, I think. She's always appreciated people who help others for a living." They ate in surprisingly comfortable silence for several minutes. Cassidy found herself stealing glances at him, trying to reconcile the man who'd pulled her through gunfire with the man making breakfast in designer jeans. He caught her looking once and smiled, just slightly, warmth in those green eyes that made something flutter in her chest she had no business feeling. The front door opened, and a woman walked in without knocking, calling out something in Italian. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, tall and elegant in a business suit, dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that immediately found Cassidy and assessed her with lawyer precision. "You must be Cassidy," the woman said, Her voice warmed despite the scrutiny. I'm Gabriella Salvatore, Dominic's sister, and the family attorney working on the federal case. I'm glad you're safe. Cassidy stood automatically, some ingrained politeness kicking in. Thank you. I don't really know what my role is in all this yet. Gabriella exchanged a look with Dominic. Your role is to stay alive and decide whether you're willing to testify. No pressure, no obligation. We protect you regardless. But your testimony could help put away some very bad people. The three of them moved to the dining table, spreading out files and documents. Gabriella walked Cassidy through the federal investigation with the kind of clear explanation that came from years of legal experience. The operation was sophisticated, involving multiple doctors across 3 states, a distribution network that sold patient photos to blackmailers and worse, encrypted communication that had taken months to crack. Dr. Warren is one of 3 primary doctors, Gabriella explained. But he's the one whose operation we can prove most definitively. Your case, along with testimonies from 6 other victims willing to come forward, builds an airtight case. 6 others. Cassidy's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Out of 47. Most are too afraid, Gabriella said gently. Or too ashamed. Which is exactly what these predators count on. That their victims will be too traumatized to fight back. Cassidy looked at Dominic, who'd been silent through most of the explanation. Why did this happen to your mother? If you don't mind me asking. He was quiet for a moment, clearly weighing how much to share. She had a health scare when I was in college. Breast cancer. She survived, thank God, but during treatment, someone in her medical team took photos. Intimate ones from her surgeries. They were used to blackmail our family, to try to force my father to allow drug trafficking through our business properties. Did you? Cassidy asked before she could stop herself. Allow it. No. Dominic's voice went hard. My father refused. Went to the FBI instead. The blackmailers released the photos publicly in retaliation. My mother had to see her private medical trauma displayed in newspapers, on websites, dissected by strangers. She barely left the house for 2 years. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. That's horrible. It taught me something, though. Dominic met her eyes, intensity in his gaze. That silence protects the guilty. That shame is a weapon these people use deliberately. And that someone has to be willing to stand up and say enough. My mother couldn't. She was too broken by it. But you could. The weight of that statement settled over Cassidy. She thought about Dr. Warren's professional demeanor, his reassurances about privacy and protection. Thought about the other 46 women whose trust had been violated the same way. Thought about how many more victims there might be if this operation continued. What do I need to do? She asked. Meet with the FBI, Gabriella said. Give a statement about your interactions with Dr. Warren, the circumstances of the photos, anything that establishes his intent to deceive. They'll walk you through what testimony would look like if the case goes to trial. I'll come with you, Dominic added. The FBI field office downtown is secure, but traveling there and back carries risk. You don't go anywhere without protection. 3 hours later, Cassidy found herself in a federal building, sitting across from 2 agents who treated her with careful respect while asking her to relive the most vulnerable moments of her medical treatment. Dominic sat beside her, silent but present, his proximity somehow making it easier to answer the questions that made her want to crawl out of her skin. Agent Morrison, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, walked her through the timeline. Agent Chin took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. They were professional, compassionate even, but the questions themselves were invasive by necessity. Did Dr. Warren explain why he was taking photographs? Agent Morrison asked. He said it was standard procedure for medical records. Cassidy heard her own voice like it belonged to someone else, distant and clinical. He said everything was confidential, protected by privacy laws. He made it seem routine. Did he ask you to sign any consent forms specific to photography? No, just the standard new patient paperwork. Did anyone else see you during the examination when photos were taken? No. He said the nurse had been called away. It was just us. The questions continued for over an hour. By the end, Cassidy felt scraped raw, exposed all over again. The agents thanked her, assured her the photos would remain sealed as evidence, explained what would happen next if she agreed to testify. You did well, Dominic said quietly as they left the building, his hand hovering near her lower back without quite touching. I know that wasn't easy. Cassidy stepped out into the Portland afternoon, grateful for fresh air and space. She noticed Marco and another guard flanking them, eyes constantly scanning the street. Noticed the SUV waiting at the curb, engine running. Noticed the way Dominic positioned himself between her and the flow of pedestrian traffic. She didn't notice the man approaching from her blind side until Dominic's arm shot out, blocking her path. Marco moved with lightning speed, intercepting someone who'd gotten too close, whose hand had been reaching for Cassidy's arm. Federal building, middle of downtown, surrounded by security, and they'd still tried. The man twisted away from Marco, disappearing into the crowd before anyone could react further. Just a near miss. A warning. A reminder that the threat was real and constant. "Let's go," Dominic said, his voice tight. Now, the drive back to his house was silent. Cassidy's hands shook in her lap, adrenaline flooding her system with delayed reaction. She'd been inches away from being grabbed, from being taken, from whatever those people planned to do to witnesses who threatened their operation. Inside the penthouse, Dominic guided her to the couch, poured her something amber from a crystal decanter. "Drink," he said. "It'll help." She drank. It burned going down, some kind of expensive whiskey that probably cost more than her car payment. But he was right, it helped. Took the edge off the shaking, warmed the cold that had settled into her bones. "This is insane," she said, hearing her voice crack. "I'm a physical therapist. I help people with exercises. I don't know how to live like this, looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to grab me." Dominic sat beside her, close but not touching, giving her space while making it clear he was there. "You're not alone in this. That's the difference. You have me, my security, my family's resources. We will keep you safe." "For how long?" "The trial could take months. Years, maybe. I can't hide in your house forever. You won't have to." His voice carried certainty she wanted desperately to believe. "These operations collapse quickly once key players are arrested. Dr. Warren gets brought in, he'll likely take a deal to testify against the bigger fish. The dominoes fall fast. And if they don't, if this drags on, then you stay here as long as it takes." Dominic turned to face her more fully. "Cassidy, look at me." She did, meeting those intense green eyes. "I meant what I said. I don't leave people unprotected. Especially not someone who's willing to stand up and fight back the way you are. You're safe here, for as long as you need to be." Something in his voice, in the way he looked at her like she mattered beyond just being a witness, cracked the careful control she'd been maintaining. Tears spilled over before she could stop them, all the fear and violation and exhaustion of the last 24 hours overwhelming her defenses. Dominic made a soft sound, concern and sympathy, and then his arms were around her. He pulled her against his chest carefully, like she might break, one hand cradling her head while the other rubbed slow circles on her back. He didn't tell her to stop crying, didn't tell her everything would be okay, just held her while she broke down, offering the kind of solid presence that made it safe to fall apart. Cassidy had no idea how long she cried. Long enough to soak his shirt, long enough for the worst of the storm to pass. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed, he handed her tissues from the side table without comment. "Sorry," she managed. "I'm not usually like this." "You're handling an impossible situation," Dominic said. "You're allowed to break down. Hell, you're entitled to complete hysterics if you want them." She let out a wet laugh. "I'll save that for tomorrow." Something shifted in his expression, a softness she hadn't seen before. "You're stronger than you think. Most people would have fallen apart completely. You're still standing." "I don't feel strong. I feel terrified." Terror and strength aren't mutually exclusive. He stood, offered his hand to help her up. "Come on. I'm going to make dinner, and you're going to tell me something about yourself that has nothing to do with any of this. Something normal. Something from before." They ended up in that magnificent kitchen again. Dominic cooked pasta while Cassidy, at his gentle prompting, talked about her work. About patients she'd helped recover from devastating injuries. About the half marathon she'd been training for before everything fell apart. About her sister who taught high school English and called her every Sunday without fail. Dominic listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention. He told her about growing up in a family that straddled two worlds, legitimate business and less legitimate connections. About studying business at UCLA before being called home when his father got sick. about his sister Gabriella's determination to use law to protect rather than exploit. The conversation flowed easier than it should have between a physical therapist and a mafia boss. They discovered unexpected common ground, shared tastes in music and books, similar dry humor that emerged when fear wasn't actively strangling them both. After dinner, after dishes were washed and put away with surprising domesticity, they migrated to the living room. The city lights spread below them. Portland transformed into something magical from this height. Cassidy curled into the corner of the couch, exhaustion pulling at her, but sleep feeling impossible. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Why do you do this? Not the protection thing. The whole, whatever your family business actually is. You're clearly smart, educated. You could do anything." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city. "Loyalty," he said finally. "Legacy. My grandfather built something from nothing, gave his children and grandchildren opportunities he never had. Yes, some of what he did was illegal, but he also supported entire neighborhoods, kept people employed, protected communities when no one else would. It's complicated. Do you want out?" She didn't know what made her ask, but something in his tone suggested conflict. "Sometimes." He turned to look at her, vulnerability in his eyes that made him suddenly seem younger. "But wanting out and being able to get out are different things. My family depends on me. The people we protect depend on us. Walking away isn't as simple as just leaving." "What would you do? If you could do anything?" He smiled, almost shy. "Architecture, maybe. I love buildings, design, how spaces can be constructed to be both beautiful and functional. This house, I designed parts of it. The things I could control. You should do it. Life's too short to spend it all doing things that make you unhappy," says the woman whose life just got blown apart by circumstances beyond her control. But there was no bite in his words, just gentle irony. "Maybe we're both due for some changes." Cassidy tucked her feet under her, feeling bold in the safety of this moment. "After this is over, after the trial, maybe we both figure out what comes next. Maybe we do." They talked until the city lights blurred, until Cassidy's words started slurring with exhaustion, until Dominic had to half carry her to the guest room because she could barely keep her eyes open. He tucked her into bed with surprising gentleness, pulling the covers up like she was something precious. "Sleep, Cassidy," he said softly. "You're safe here. I promise." As the door clicked shut behind him and sleep finally claimed her, Cassidy realized something that should have terrified her, but somehow didn't. She believed him, believed in his protection, his promises, the safety he offered. She'd known him barely 36 hours, and already she trusted him more than she'd trusted anyone in years. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it was just her mind grasping for security in chaos. Or maybe, just maybe, Dominic Salvatore was exactly what he appeared to be. A man who'd been hurt and chosen to prevent that hurt in others. A man whose power was real, but whose capacity for gentleness was equally true. She fell asleep thinking about his hands in her hair when she'd cried, the way he'd held her like she mattered, the quiet intensity in his eyes when he promised she was safe. And somewhere in the space between waking and sleeping, Cassidy admitted to herself that danger and safety were getting confused in her mind. Because the most dangerous thing in her current situation might not be the people hunting her. It might be the way she was starting to feel about the man protecting her. A week passed in a strange, suspended reality where danger existed somewhere outside the glass walls of Dominic's fortress, but felt increasingly distant from the routine Cassidy and Dominic built together. She woke each morning to the smell of coffee, found him in the kitchen or his home office, fell into easy conversation over breakfast. They worked separately during the day, her doing telehealth appointments with patients while he handled whatever business required his attention. Evenings meant cooking together, testing recipes from the impressive cookbook collection on his shelf, arguing playfully about whether garlic was a suggestion or a requirement. It felt dangerously normal, dangerously comfortable, dangerously like something Cassidy could get used to if she let herself. She caught herself noticing things she had no business noticing. The way his jaw tightened when he concentrated on work calls. How his hair fell across his forehead when he leaned over the stove. The casual strength in his hands when he chopped vegetables or opened wine bottles. The sound of his laugh, rare but genuine, when she made him smile with stories from her physical therapy practice. And she was almost certain he was noticing her too. caught his gaze lingering when he thought she wasn't looking, felt the way he found reasons to be close without quite touching, his presence in her space becoming familiar and wanted. Noticed how his voice softened when he said her name, like the syllables meant something. On Friday evening, Dominic emerged from his office looking unusually uncertain. "My mother called," he said. "She's demanding to meet you. Sunday dinner. The whole family will be there." Cassidy looked up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing patient files. "Your whole family?" "Mother, Gabriella, my younger brother Antonio, and his wife, some cousins. It's a thing we do most Sundays. She's been asking about you all week, and I've been deflecting, but apparently word got out that I have a woman living in my house, and now there's no escape." "You don't have to explain me to your family," Cassidy said, even as something warm unfurled in her chest at the idea of meeting them. "I'm just someone you're protecting." Something flickered in Dominic's eyes. "You're not just anything." But he didn't elaborate, just pulled out his phone to confirm with his mother before he could apparently change his mind. Sunday arrived with unexpectedly nervous energy. Cassidy changed clothes 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a burgundy sweater from Gabriella's closet wardrobe. She twisted her hair up, then down, then up again. Finally gave up and left it loose around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," Dominic said when she emerged, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. His mother's house was in the suburbs, a sprawling Mediterranean-style villa surrounded by meticulously maintained gardens. Cars already filled the driveway, voices drifting from inside. Dominic's hand found the small of Cassidy's back as they walked to the door, the touch casual but grounding. The interior was warm chaos. Children running through halls. Adults talking over each other in Italian and English. Cooking smells that made Cassidy's mouth water. And at the center of it all, a small, elegant woman with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes exactly like Dominic's. "Mama," Dominic said, and the warmth in his voice transformed him into someone younger, softer. "This is Cassidy Monroe." His mother pulled Cassidy into a hug before she could prepare for it. "Welcome, welcome. Any woman who can make my son smile the way Gabriella says you do, she is family already." Gabriella appeared, rescuing Cassidy from her mother's enthusiastic embrace. "Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone before the Inquisition begins." The evening passed in a blur of names and faces and stories. Antonio, the younger brother, worked in legitimate real estate development and spent most of dinner arguing with Dominic about soccer. His wife Clara taught kindergarten and immediately bonded with Cassidy over their shared experience helping people. The cousins ranged from teenagers to 40s, all clearly close, all treating Cassidy with warmth once they understood she was under Dominic's protection. It was the most normal family dinner Cassidy had experienced in years. Her own family was small, fractured by divorce and distance. But this, the loud overlapping conversations and casual affection and multi-generational chaos, this felt like something from a movie. Something she hadn't realized she'd been missing. After dinner, while Dominic was occupied with his brother and cousins talking business in the other room, his mother pulled Cassidy aside into the quiet of the garden. They sat on a bench surrounded by roses, the evening air cooling toward autumn. "He is different with you," his mother said without preamble. "Softer. More like the boy he was before everything became so heavy." "He's been very kind to me," Cassidy said carefully, unsure how much the woman knew about the circumstances. "Kind?" His mother smiled. "Yes, he is kind. Too kind sometimes, carrying everyone's burdens. But with you, I see something else. I see him want something for himself. I'm just someone he's protecting." The words felt hollow even as Cassidy spoke them. "My son protects many people. He does not bring them to Sunday dinner. He does not look at them the way he looks at you when he thinks no one notices." His mother reached over, patted Cassidy's hand. "What was done to you? The photos, the violation, I understand. It happened to me. Different circumstances, but the same shame, the same exposure. Dominic told me. I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I am sorry it happened to you. But I want you to know something." His mother's voice grew fierce. "What they did to us, it does not define us. We are not those images. We are not their victims forever. We survive. We heal. And sometimes, if we are very lucky, we find people who see us, really see us, not the violation but the whole person." Tears pricked Cassidy's eyes. "Thank you for saying that. You are good for him." His mother stood, smiled. "He is good for you too, I think." Don't let fear stop you from seeing what is possible. Back at the penthouse that night, the air felt different. Charged. Cassidy was hyper-aware of Dominic's presence as they cleaned up from the take-home containers his mother had insisted on packing. Their hands brushed, reaching for the same dish. He stood close behind her at the sink, his warmth radiating against her back. "Your family is wonderful," she said, needing to fill the silence with something. "They liked you." Dominic's voice was lower than usual. "My mother especially. She pulled you aside for the garden talk. She told me you're different with me." Cassidy turned, found him closer than she expected. "Are you?" "Yes." The honesty in that single word stole her breath. "You make me want things I have no business wanting." "What things?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Dominic's hand came up, cupped her cheek, his thumb stroking across her skin with devastating gentleness. "This," he said. "You. Something normal and real and separate from all the darkness. Something that's mine not because I protect it, but because it chooses me." Cassidy leaned into his touch, her eyes closing for a moment. "I do choose you. I shouldn't, probably. You're complicated and dangerous and everything my sensible physical therapist brain says to avoid. But I choose you anyway." He leaned closer, his forehead touching hers, both of them breathing the same air. Cassidy tilted her face up, invitation clear, wanting his kiss with an intensity that should have frightened her. The shrill ring of his phone shattered the moment. Dominic cursed softly in Italian, stepping back to answer. His expression shifted as he listened, going hard and dangerous. When he hung up, turned to Cassidy. "Someone delivered a package to the gate. Security intercepted it. We need to see what's inside." The package sat on his office desk, already opened by Marco, who'd been wearing gloves. Inside were printed copies of Cassidy's medical photos, dozens of them, along with a typed note. "Withdraw your statement, or these go public. You have 48 hours. Cassidy stared at the images of herself, at the vulnerability captured and now weaponized. Bile rose in her throat. "They're never going to stop," she said. "They're going to keep using these against me forever." "No." Dominic's voice was lethal. "They're not. Because I'm ending this. Now." He pulled out his phone, made a series of calls while Cassidy stood frozen. She heard him speaking rapid Italian, coordinating something, his words clipped and furious. When he finished, he turned to find her shaking, arms wrapped around herself. "Come here," he said, and when she didn't move, he crossed to her instead, pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her with protective strength. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I can't do this anymore." The words broke out of her. "I can't keep being afraid. Can't keep seeing those photos used against me. Can't keep feeling like I'm trapped in this nightmare." "You're not trapped." Dominic tilted her face up, his eyes intense. "You're choosing to fight. That's different. That's powerful. And you're not doing it alone." Something in Cassidy cracked. The careful distance she'd been maintaining, the walls she'd built to protect herself from getting too attached to this man who was only supposed to be her protector. It all shattered under the weight of his absolute certainty that she mattered. She kissed him, pushed up on her toes, and pressed her mouth to his before fear could stop her, before logic could intervene, before all the reasons this was complicated could be weighed against the simple fact that she wanted this. Wanted him. Dominic made a sound, surprise and desire, and then he was kissing her back. His hands came up to frame her face, tilting her head to deepen the kiss, his mouth moving over hers with a combination of tenderness and hunger that made her knees weak. He kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything, like nothing else in the world existed except this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "Cassidy," he said, her name a question and a prayer. "Are you sure? This changes everything. Everything already changed the moment you pulled me out of that restaurant." She met his eyes. "I'm tired of being afraid, of letting fear dictate my choices. I want this. I want you. If that's okay." His answer was another kiss, slower this time, more thorough. His hands slid into her hair, cradling her head like she might break. She pressed closer, her fingers gripping his shirt, feeling the warmth of him through the fabric. They made it to his bedroom somehow, a trail of careful touches and desperate kisses. Dominic pulled back when they reached the bed, his breathing ragged. "We can stop," he said. "Any time you want to stop, we stop. You're in control here. I don't want to stop." Cassidy reached for him, pulling him down to her. I want to feel something besides fear. I want to feel you. He undressed her slowly, with reverent attention, his hands gentle as he traced the lines of her body. When he hesitated over removing her shirt, aware that this would expose skin that had been photographed against her will, she guided his hands, showing him it was okay. You're beautiful, Dominic said, his voice rough. Not because of what anyone photographed, because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, the way you smile when you think no one's watching. All of you. Tears pricked her eyes, even as desire pooled low in her belly. Show me, she whispered. Show me how you see me. And he did. With hands and mouth and whispered words, he mapped her body like she was territory worth exploring. He touched her with a combination of reverence and passion that made her forget every moment of violation, every exposure that hadn't been her choice. This was her choice. Him touching her, seeing her, knowing her, this was hers. When he finally moved over her, his body covering hers, Cassidy felt safe in a way that should have been impossible given her recent trauma. But Dominic's careful attention, his constant checking in, his focus on her pleasure and comfort, it rewrote what intimacy meant. Is this okay? He asked, his voice strained with restraint. Are you okay? Yes. She pulled him closer, her legs wrapping around his hips. More than okay. Don't stop. The world narrowed to sensation. His mouth on hers, his hands in her hair, the careful way he entered her, giving her time to adjust, waiting for her signal before moving. The building pressure and heat and need that wound tighter with every stroke. From Dominic's perspective, holding Cassidy felt like holding something holy. She trusted him with this, with her body that had been violated, with her vulnerability that had been exploited. And he would die before he broke that trust. He watched her face, cataloging every expression of pleasure, adjusting his movements to what made her gasp and arch against him. When she called his name, her nails digging into his shoulders, he felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just physical. This was claiming and being claimed. This was choosing and being chosen. This was love, whether he was ready to name it or not. Cassidy, he breathed against her neck. God, Cassidy. She came apart in his arms with his name on her lips, and he followed her over that edge moments later, burying his face in her hair, holding her like she was the only thing anchoring him to earth. They lay tangled together afterwards, hearts slowly returning to normal rhythm, the reality of what they'd just done settling over them. Dominic pulled a blanket over them both, gathered her close against his chest. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Really okay? Cassidy nodded against his shoulder. Better than okay. That was, she paused, searching for words. That was healing. Does that make sense? Yes. He pressed a kiss to her hair. It makes perfect sense. She traced patterns on his chest, her fingers following old scars. What happens now? Now we deal with the threat. Now we finish this so you can have your life back. His voice roughened. And then, if you want, we figure out what this is between us. Without the protection arrangement complicating things. What if I want it complicated? She propped herself up to look at him. What if I don't want to wait until it's over to figure out what we are? Dominic cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. Then we don't wait. We're honest about what this is while we're in it. What is it? To you? He was quiet for a long moment, searching for truth. It's everything I didn't know I wanted until you. It's terrifying and right and more real than anything I've felt in years. It's falling for someone I swore I'd just protect, and not being sorry about it. I'm falling too, Cassidy admitted. Probably have been since you held me while I cried. Maybe since you made me breakfast that first morning. I don't know when it happened exactly, just that it did. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other, the threat outside temporarily forgotten in the safety they'd built between them. And if both of them knew that love was the unspoken truth neither was quite ready to name, they kept that knowledge close, protected, waiting for the right moment. Tomorrow they would deal with the people threatening her. Tomorrow they would face reality and danger and all the complications their relationship created. But tonight, for these few hours, they were just two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and chosen to hold on. The temporary peace shattered at 6 the following morning when every news outlet in Portland ran the same story. Federal witness in medical exploitation case identified. Cassidy's face filled television screens. Her name, her address, her workplace, all public information now. Someone inside the investigation had leaked. Dominic woke her with urgent gentleness, his face grim. We need to move. Now. Cassidy was still pulling on clothes when Marco rushed in. 3 vehicles circling the property. Unknown plates. They know she's here. The next hour blurred into chaos. Dominic made rapid calls while his security team mobilized. Cassidy's phone exploded with messages from family, friends, former patients, everyone who'd seen the news and recognized her. Her sister's panicked voicemail made her hands shake. Your sister is already in protective custody, Gabriella said, arriving at the house with federal agents. So are your parents. They're safe. But you need to disappear until we can contain this. They left through an underground garage Cassidy hadn't known existed, switching vehicles twice before heading north out of the city. Dominic drove himself, Marco following in a second car, both vehicles equipped with enough weapons to start a small war. The safe house was 2 hours outside Portland, tucked into forest that stretched for miles. Small, isolated, completely off-grid. Dominic walked through every room, checking windows and sight lines, while Marco established a security perimeter outside. You'll stay here, Dominic said, his voice harder than she'd heard it. Marco stays with you. 2 other guards are on their way. You don't leave this house for any reason. Where are you going? But Cassidy already knew. Saw it in the cold fury in his eyes, the way he moved with lethal purpose. To end this. He crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. This doesn't stop until the people running this operation are eliminated. Not arrested. Not charged. Eliminated. They leaked your information. They're coming for your family. I'm not waiting for them to make another move. Dominic, you could be killed. The words came out panicked. You can't just go after them alone. I'm not alone. I have resources you haven't seen. His thumb stroked her cheeks. And I've been patient long enough. No one threatens what's mine and walks away. What's yours? Something in those words made her chest ache. You. His voice softened. You're mine, Cassidy. Which means your safety is worth more than anything. Including my own safety. Including the law. Including whatever comes after. He kissed her then, deep and thorough and desperate. Like he was memorizing her. Like he might not come back. When he pulled away, Cassidy grabbed his shirt. You come back to me, she said fiercely. You hear me? You don't get to make me fall for you and then disappear. You come back. I will. I promise. He pressed one more kiss to her forehead. Lock the door behind me. Trust Marco. I'll be back before you know it. Then he was gone, and Cassidy was alone in a safe house in the middle of nowhere with armed guards and nothing to do except wait and fear. The hours crawled. Marco made food she couldn't eat. Tried to engage her in conversation she couldn't focus on. She paced the small house like a caged animal, her phone showing news updates about the manhunt for the people behind the exploitation ring. Federal raids happening across 3 states. Arrests being made. But nothing about Dominic. Nothing about whether he was safe. Her mind created terrible scenarios. Him shot. Him captured. Him lying somewhere bleeding while she sat useless and protected. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent weeks being the one protected, the one kept safe while he handled danger. Now she understood how agonizing that position was. How helpless it felt to love someone in danger and be unable to help. Love. Yes, that's what this was. She'd been falling since that first breakfast, maybe since he'd pulled her through gunfire and looked at her like she mattered. And now he was out there risking everything while she waited and hoped and prayed to any god listening that he'd come back whole. Dominic moved through the warehouse district with Marco's cousin Luca and 2 others he trusted absolutely. They'd tracked the operations command center through digital footprints Gabriella's tech expert had uncovered. 3 men ran the whole network. Dr. Warren was small-time compared to them. These were the ones who'd built an empire on exploitation, who'd gotten rich destroying women's lives. The building was nondescript. Industrial. Easy to overlook. Perfect for illegal operations. Dominic's team moved in coordinated silence, each man knowing his role, trusting the others completely. This was what years of working together created. Precision. Efficiency. Ruthlessness when required. They encountered guards. Professional security hired to protect the operation. Dominic didn't kill unnecessarily, but he didn't hesitate when someone reached for a weapon. This was war. Had been since they'd threatened Cassidy. Since they'd leaked her information and come after her family. The 3 men were in an office on the 2nd floor. Expensive suits. Expensive watches. Wealth built on suffering. They looked up when Dominic walked in, weapons drawn on them, their guards already neutralized. "You made a mistake," Dominic said, his voice deadly calm. "You went after someone under my protection. You exposed her, threatened her family. That was your last mistake." They tried to negotiate, offered money, information, deals. Dominic listened to none of it. He'd come here for one purpose, and he wouldn't leave until it was accomplished. The confrontation was brutal and brief. When it was over, 3 men who'd exploited dozens of women lay dead. The operation's financial records were in Gabriella's hands for the FBI, and every server containing victim photos was wiped clean. Dominic personally smashed the hard drives, ensuring nothing remained. Then he burned the backups they found hidden in a safe. Cassidy's photos, all the victims' photos, everything that had been stolen and weaponized. Gone. Reduced to ash and melted plastic. "It's done," he told Gabriella over the phone. "All of it. Send the FBI to clean up." The drive back to the safe house took forever. Dominic's hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind kept circling to Cassidy. To her face when he'd left. To her fierce command that he come back to her. To the knowledge that he'd killed for her today. Not in self-defense. Not in protection of territory or family business. But in deliberate elimination of threats to the woman he loved. He should probably feel something about that. Guilt, maybe. Doubt. But all he felt was savage satisfaction that she was safe now. Truly safe. The people who'd hunted her were gone. The photos that haunted her were destroyed. She could have her life back. Whether that life included him was a different question. One he'd have to let her answer when she knew everything he'd done. Cassidy heard the vehicle approaching and nearly broke Marco's nose rushing past him to the door. She flung it open to find Dominic climbing out of the SUV, whole and alive in here. She launched herself at him before he'd fully cleared the vehicle, her arms wrapping around his neck, her legs around his waist, nearly knocking them both over. "You're okay," she gasped against his neck. "You're okay. You're here." Dominic's arms came around her, holding her tight. "I'm here. I'm okay. It's over, Cassidy. It's all over." She pulled back to look at his face, her hands framing his jaw. Not hurt. Not injured. Not hurt. He carried her inside, away from Marco's knowing smile. Sat on the couch with her still in his lap, unwilling to let her go. "They're gone. All of them. The operation is shut down. The photos are destroyed. Every copy, every backup. Your face won't be used against you ever again." Tears streamed down her face. "Really? All of them? All of them?" "I made sure." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You're safe. Your family is safe. You can go back to your life now." Something in his tone made her still. Go back. Like he wouldn't be part of that life. Like this was an ending instead of a beginning. "What if I don't want to go back?" she said. "What if I want something different?" "Cassidy." His voice was rough. "You need to know what I did today. Not just stopped them. Not just had them arrested. I killed them. 3 men. Executed them for what they did to you and the others. I'm not a good man. Not the kind of man you should build a future with. You're exactly the kind of man I should build a future with." She cupped his face, making him meet her eyes. "You're the man who protected me when no one else could. Who held me when I broke. Who saw me as more than what was done to me. Who ended the nightmare so I could be free. You're the man I love." The last word hung between them, huge and terrifying and true. "You love me." Not a question. Almost disbelieving. "I love you." She said it stronger this time. "I'm in love with you, Dominic Salvatore. Your darkness doesn't scare me. Your protection doesn't feel like a cage. Being with you feels like the first real thing I've felt in years. So if you're trying to push me away because you think you're not good enough, stop. Let me decide what I want. And I want you." Dominic made a sound, half laugh and half something broken. "I love you too. God. Cassidy, I love you so much it terrifies me. I've loved you since you yelled at me in that restaurant. Since you chose to trust me. Since you looked at me like I was someone worth choosing. Then choose me back. Choose us. Whatever that looks like." He kissed her answer, pouring everything he felt into the press of his mouth against hers. Relief and love and desperate gratitude. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I choose you," he said. "I choose us. Whatever comes next, we figure it out together." "Together," Cassidy agreed. And for the first time since seeing those photos on a stranger's tablet, since having her privacy violated and her safety shattered, Cassidy felt something besides fear and anger. She felt hope. She felt possibility. She felt the future opening up in ways she'd stopped believing were possible. The nightmare was over. The real story was just beginning. 6 months later, Cassidy woke in Dominic's bed, their bed now, to autumn sunlight streaming through those floor-to-ceiling windows. His arm was wrapped around her waist, his breathing deep and even against her neck. She'd moved in officially 3 months ago, though truthfully she'd never really left after that safe house. Her studio apartment sat mostly empty, a lease she kept paying out of some lingering instinct for independence even though this penthouse had become home. She eased out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him. Sunday morning meant family dinner at his mother's later, but first she had paperwork to finish for her new clinic. Monroe Physical Therapy had opened 6 weeks ago in a bright space in northwest Portland, funded partially by a loan Dominic had insisted on giving her at ridiculously favorable terms. She'd argued. He'd countered that investing in her dream was the least complicated thing about their relationship. She'd eventually accepted because he was right, and because maintaining her independence mattered to both of them. The clinic was thriving. Patients appreciated her gentle approach, her understanding of trauma and recovery that went deeper than just physical rehabilitation. She'd hired 2 other therapists, was already looking at expanding. Her life had rebuilt itself into something stronger than before. Coffee brewing, laptop open on the kitchen island, Cassidy reviewed the week's schedule. She had a full patient load, a consultation with a local hospital about contract work, and a meeting with her accountant. Normal things. Professional things. The kind of routine that had seemed impossible 6 months ago when her face was all over the news and people wanted her dead. The trial had been swift once the operations leadership was eliminated. Dr. Warren had taken a plea deal, testified against the remaining network members, and was now serving 15 years. 43 other doctors and associates had been charged. The 6 women who'd testified alongside Cassidy had formed a support group that met monthly. They were survivors, not victims. Warriors, not casualties. Cassidy felt arms wrap around her from behind, Dominic's chin resting on her shoulder. "Morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." She leaned back into him, feeling the solid warmth of his chest against her back. "Good thinking, though. Happy thinking." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Tell me." "The clinic is doing better than projected. I hired another therapist yesterday. We're booked solid through December." She turned in his arms to face him. "I'm building something real, Dominic. Something that's mine. And it feels amazing." "You're amazing." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "I'm so proud of you. Of everything you've built." They made breakfast together, the easy choreography of 6 months sharing space. He scrambled eggs while she toasted bread. She poured coffee while he plated food. Small domestic rituals that felt more intimate than grand gestures. His mother was in her element that evening, presiding over a dining room filled with family. Cassidy had her own chair now, her own place at the table, accepted so completely that it felt like she'd always been there. Gabriella sat beside her, sharing legal war stories. Antonio's kids called her Aunt Cassidy and begged her to come to their soccer games. Clara and she had started a book club with some other family friends. This was belonging. This was family. This was everything Cassidy hadn't realized she'd been missing from her smaller, quieter life before. After dinner, while the family was still lingering over dessert and espresso, Dominic took Cassidy's hand and led her out to the garden. The roses were past their peak, but still beautiful, the evening air crisp with approaching winter. "I need to ask you something," he said, and the sudden nervousness in his voice made Cassidy's heart race. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring that caught the garden lights. Simple, elegant, a single diamond set in platinum that somehow felt exactly right. 6 months ago, Dominic said, "I pulled you out of a restaurant during a gunfight." Technically not the most romantic beginning. You were terrified. I was, well, also terrified if I'm honest. Terrified I couldn't keep you safe. Terrified I'd fail you the way I couldn't protect my mother. You didn't fail anyone. Cassidy's voice was thick with emotion. "Let me finish." He smiled, thumbs stroking over her knuckles. "You were this force of nature I wasn't prepared for. Strong when you should have been broken. Brave when you had every right to be afraid. You trusted me with your safety, your vulnerability, your heart. And somewhere in protecting you, I fell completely in love with you. I love you too. Tears streamed down her face now. I know my world is complicated. I know I'm not the safe choice. But I promise you this, Cassidy Monroe. I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you feel safe, valued, loved. I will be your partner in building whatever future you want. I will stand beside you, behind you, wherever you need me to be. So, will you marry me? Yes. The word came out choked with tears and joy. Yes, absolutely yes. He slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like promise and future and everything they'd survived to get here. When they finally broke apart, the family was watching from the dining room windows, his mother already crying happy tears, Gabriella grinning like she'd known this was coming. The celebration lasted hours. Champagne and congratulations, and his mother immediately pulling out wedding magazines she'd apparently been saving just in case. Plans were made and suggestions offered, and Cassidy found herself swept up in the warm chaos of a family that had claimed her as their own. Later that night, back at the penthouse, Dominic led her to his office. The room where she'd first really talked to him, where they'd planned her protection, where he'd worked to keep her safe. I have something for you, he said, pulling out a flash drive. The FBI closed the case officially last week. This is documentation. Every photo that was taken of you, every copy they found, every backup, all destroyed. There's a federal certificate confirming complete destruction of evidence. Your photos don't exist anymore anywhere except that sealed court file, and those are protected permanently. Cassidy took the drive with shaking hands. She'd known intellectually that the photos were gone. Dominic had told her. The FBI had confirmed it. But holding physical proof, documented evidence that her violation couldn't be repeated, something inside her finally unclenched. Thank you, she whispered. For all of it. For ending it. For making me safe. You made yourself safe. Dominic pulled her close. You chose to fight. To testify. To stand up. I just made sure you survived long enough to win. She thought about that journey. From the violated woman in Dr. Warren's office, to the terrified witness in the restaurant, to the survivor who'd rebuilt her entire life. She wasn't defined by what had been done to her. She was defined by how she'd refused to let it destroy her. I want to ask you something, Cassidy said, looking up at him. That day in your office when you were talking about wanting to do architecture instead of family business. Did you mean it? Every word. Then do it. After we're married. Start taking classes. Design buildings. You've spent so long protecting everyone else. Let yourself have something just for you. Maybe I will. He smiled, the expression transforming his face. Maybe we both get to start over. Build the lives we actually want. They stood in his office, engaged now, committed to a future together. Cassidy looked at the photos on his desk. Not medical photos. Not images stolen against her will. But engagement photos they'd taken that afternoon in the garden. Wedding planning materials his mother had sent home with them. Pictures of the future they were choosing together. Before I let you go today, I want to share something. Have you ever survived something that should have broken you, only to discover it led you exactly where you needed to be? I'd love to know your thoughts on healing, on finding unexpected safety, on how sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest futures. Drop a comment about your own journey with overcoming betrayal or finding trust again. Your story matters. You matter. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that healing is possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that love can grow even in the darkest soil. Cassidy Monroe had been violated, exploited, hunted, but she'd also been protected, loved, chosen. She'd found strength she didn't know she had. Found family in unexpected places. Found love with a man who saw past her wounds to the warrior underneath. 6 months ago, she'd stared at stolen photos on a stranger's tablet and felt her world collapse. Now she wore that stranger's ring and felt her world expanding into possibilities she'd stopped letting herself imagine. The photos were gone. The threats eliminated. The nightmare over. But the story wasn't ending. It was transforming, the way Cassidy herself had transformed, from victim to survivor to woman who chose her own future. She'd walked into Dominic's office once before and seen images that represented violation and shame. Now she stood in that same office and saw only images of love and choice and the future they were building together. That was the real victory. Not that the bad things hadn't happened, but that they didn't get to define what came after. Cassidy defined that. She chose love over fear, chose trust over suspicion, chose to build something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. And standing there with Dominic's arms around her, his mother's ring on her finger, and a future full of possibilities stretching before them, Cassidy finally felt something she'd thought was lost forever. She felt safe, not because someone was protecting her, though Dominic would always be there, but because she'd reclaimed her own power, her own agency, her own right to determine what her story meant. The violation didn't win. The fear didn't win. She won. They won. And that made all the difference.